The And Terry Show series of podcasts continues from the Hobbit Hole. I'm waiting from the company of my good friend Jim, who's now, with one cataract removed, seeing the light of day. I hope it's light. He's certainly seeing more color. And I do thank Jim for writing in for a comment on the guitar noodling that becomes a song and what that transformation looks like and how two creative minds on the same track in terms of creativity can align and work together for a greater good where the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. Is that the way it goes? I don't know. Yeah, working together is always a joy and collaborative process and songwriting, and that's what I enjoy. Jim is a solo artist. He likes being in charge of the whole thing and seeing it all through, and he's got a vision, and he believes that vision is divine in origin, and so he's true to that vision, creating his music, and he's working on his next album. And I think I saw, did I not see a track on his YouTube channel? So check it out. I think I've got Jim's YouTube channel linked below the Jim and Terry Show, so you can check it out and make sure that you take up the latest of whatever Jim is up to on his solo album efforts. And I'm just quickly trying to scroll through and see if I can find it. I believe it was, if I can see it, the Jim Sampson Matthias Song Collection. I think if you click on other places underneath, you will see a link, and that will take you to Jim, and you will see that he had the Lucy video, I think, is one of the latest ones. And I think he's continuing that. Anyway, good for you, Jim. Now that you can actually see what you're doing down in your little hobbit hole, then perhaps we can expect some changes in the way you do it, your methodology, your learning curve. Yeah, we're all in our 70s, but, the learning curve might be slightly more difficult to trudge along. It might be slightly steeper for us as we age, but I swear, if we don't keep learning new stuff, we will become inert. And so I swear by challenges and new tech, and I'm glad for all the stuff that we involve ourselves in that keeps us thinking. Speaking of thinking, things that, maybe this is a theme. Instead of have you heard, things that don't make sense is a common theme that I've been finding. So as I go around Twitter and social media and look for things that are of interest in the realm of, why would you think that? Why would you say that? Why would you do that? In what world does this make sense? This thing that you are claiming to be true. And last time I sort of mentioned that there were some issues that I was finding that these things do not make sense. And I called October 7th a clarifying moment, or at least it should have been for everybody, not just for the woke left. October 7th should be a clarification for everybody. And here's what I mean. Just on Twitter today, I saw this thing that I thought, well, this is interesting. Let's poke around a bit. You can find it under twitter.com/CSSW4Palestine, the number 4 Palestine. It's Columbia University Social Workers Program. Social Workers for Palestine is what the subdivision is. And it's asking for a couple of things. And so one of the things is this thing. And I'll read it. We will be having our second teach-in this Wednesday, December 6th at 12 p.m. in room C03 at the Social Work Building. We will discuss the significance of, now this is where I want you to highlight this, the Palestinian counteroffensive of October 7th and the centrality of the revolutionary violence to anti-imperialism. See all there. What the beep? I wish I had Jim here to do one of his one of his sounds, screeches, one of those auga horns, or maybe just a little bike horns that, you squeeze the bulb and you go, bomb, some kind of censorship. Yeah, because I'm going to let go an expletive. What? Significance of October 7th Palestinian counteroffensive? This is a joke right? You don't mean this seriously. This is satire. This is a play on words. This is you having fun. You being Columbia Social Workers for Palestine. Who on God's green earth do you think you are? How can you label October 7th, an invasion of 4,000 terrorists, the killing of, and I now think the source is the downsizing, used to be 1,400. I think they are now saying it's about 1,200. Doesn't matter the number, you're over 1,000 regardless. And 200 and some odd hostages, only some of which have been released. The stories of evil, of brutalizing, of raping, of dismembering, disfiguring, torturing, and you call that a significant Palestinian counteroffensive? You are offensive. I'm sorry, if you say that about what took place by Hamas, you are offensive to all that is normal and decent in humanity. If you can justify that kind of language, and that's why words matter and why it's important to mean what you say and say what you mean. So I'm sorry, University of Columbia Social Workers for Palestine. You are right out to lunch. And that's from a left-leaning, Jim would say, I lean so far left, I'm right. I lean to the left and I do not get this at all. So truth is truth. And when you say, but your truth is more important than somebody else's truth, there is a problem. I think that all needs to be examined. So I've poked around with the Columbia Social Workers for Palestine site. And though there is a point which is fair to make, which is suffering is suffering, killing is killing, children dying is children dying. You cannot equivocate. You cannot make this false comparison between the genocidal annihilation of Israeli settlements and settlers with what is going on right now in the reprisal against Hamas. I'm sorry that people are getting caught up in it, and I don't know if there's another way except if you had have turned over Hamas before it all began, if you had have ratted them out beforehand, if you had have done anything but allowed October 7th to take place and then show up in Toronto and Montreal and Western cities across the United States, Europe, UK, and start beeping your horns and flag waving and celebrating on October 7th. What the hell is the matter with you? And I think that's where I began to sort of say, is it just Hamas? And I know people will say, well, you can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. You can't just say all of Gaza is Hamas. No, you can't. But until people stand up and say they are not, I'm thinking the presumed innocence is rather presumed guilt until you distance yourself from what's going on. So that's my take. And where did I get all this from? Well, I started looking at a feed, and one of them is Bill Kristol, a political commentator who I follow. And I did like Bill Kristol for a long time because he's obviously a conservative, a Republican. And he was responsible for leading, against Bill Clinton, some progressive policies that I thought, why are you doing this? Why are you trying to circumvent Clinton's policies in terms of Medicare for all? And it comes to mind, of course, that conservatives tend to want to spend less and remove policies that help other people because, well, in America, you believe God somehow created you to be self-sufficient and to look after yourselves. And goodness knows you don't take handouts. And goodness knows it's America, after all. Well, I see that Bill Kristol's become a never Trump. And especially with a publication, a special edition of it, the Atlantic Monthly. And you can get the first installment of it available this week, I think, second coming next week. A series of editorials or articles on the impending disaster which would be a Trump election win in 2024. So I followed Bill Kristol, and this is one of the things that he was talking about on his Twitter feed. And since I follow him, that's sort of where I went. Now, this keeps on coming back and goes around. American GOP, very similar to Canadian Conservatives, especially in Alberta with Danielle Smith. Don't trust them as far as I can throw them in terms of helping other people. It's all about business. It's all about oil. It's about petrodollars. It's about helping the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and lying through your teeth while claiming something to be so that isn't. And I think of Danielle Smith in healthcare and having Preston Manning pen a paper on healthcare. Really? Yeah, Alberta. What are you thinking? And that takes me all the way around to this article on Columbia social workers for Palestine. What on earth, in what universe does this all make any sense? It is the Stranger Things upside down. It is the land where bizarro stuff happens, where people claim to speak truth when really they are lying through their teeth. So if you're for Palestine, that's one thing. If you're for a dual state, and I'm not even sure that that can happen, because if you want an Islamic state, it's not going to be democratic, and it's not going to be liberal, and it's not going to be full of rights and freedoms, because that is the opposite of what Arab Islamic states do. They're more theocracies, and they are autocracies, but they are not democracies. I'm not sure how I'd feel living next door to an Islamic state where jihad is okay, where it's okay to annihilate your neighbor. How can you possibly do that? Well, that's what the problem is at the present time. In the meantime, no more hostages. Why? Well, talks broke down. How did they break down? At the end of a series of missile launches. That's how Hamas works. There was a truce. There was an agreement of non-violence, cessation, and it was broken on October the 7th. What makes you think that there would be any agreement now to cease firing? There is none. Hamas is not worth its weight in truth. There is no truth in Hamas. So how is it possible that the West and universities across Western Europe, across Canada, the United States, are claiming this for Palestine stuff without acknowledging October 7th as a heinous, a gross distortion of all that is human and what we value as kindness, compassion, long-suffering, and care? It wasn't a resistance. It is not a resistance. It was a massacre and a genocide. Defining the terms is important. Jim and Terry Show. Bye-bye for now.